Hey guys, Matt Allen here. Welcome back to Tactical Bass, and today we are talking about tail spins. When you've got baitfish activity, when you have bass eating baitfish in the fall or the winter, the tail spin is one of the most deadly baits to target those fish, and it is often overlooked. This is an amazing bait, and today I'm going to teach you how to use it. The tail spin is an amazing bait this time of year. It's a baitfish imitator with different colors. You can match virtually anything in the water, anything that your bass are eating. You could match perch, you could match all sorts of different baitfish. You know, bluegills, crappie, shad, silver-side minnows, you name it. There's going to be a bait to match whatever those fish are eating. So, what is the deal with the tail spinner? Why do you throw it? What's its purpose? Well, the purpose is multifaceted. Essentially, its purpose is to catch bass, right? But the reason it's so good is because you can cover water and you can adapt them. There are different ways to retrieve them, and in a minute I'm going to show you all of those different retrieves that I use with the tail spin, and you will realize how truly versatile the bait is. You can fish it in 2 feet of water, you can fish it in 50 feet of water, and you can fish them both with the exact same efficiency. You can cover a ton of water and produce a lot of bites. So what I have here is my actual tail spinner box with some of my favorite baits in it. There's a handful that really stand out for me. Probably the 3 or 4 that I've had the most success with. The first one is a Jackal Daracoop, and this was actually a new bait this year, and we went out and just did so much damage with this bait. I mean, we just caught them and caught them and caught them and caught them. This is a bait that I'm extremely excited about. Very small profile, right? But a small profile does not necessarily mean small bass in the fall. Bass are eating small bait. So when you go to that smaller profile, you are matching the hatch. You are throwing what those fish are eating. Let me pull one of these guys out. What I like so much about the Daracoop specifically is how hard this tail vibrates. I mean, it is back there just buzzing underwater. Bzzz. You know, that thing is just spinning down there. It's pulling so hard, and it just seems to pull fish from an incredible distance. Much like any spinnerbait or chatterbait or a lipless crankbait for that matter. Any bait where you're working like a stop and go retrieve, or when you're first starting your retrieve in and around cover, the key to a good bait is a bait that starts up and is doing what it should be doing immediately. A good chatterbait versus a terrible chatterbait is just the difference between a bait that starts instantly and is still up against the cover when it looks good, and one that takes 2 or 3 feet to start and is no longer near the fish. Well, it's no different with a tail spin. My ideal tail spin is a bait that starts up and starts spinning instantly when I engage. And that guy right there does it better than any bait I've ever used. And we have had a blast with it this year. I can't say that enough. The other standouts for me, number 2 is definitely the axe blade. I have more time into an axe blade than any other tail spin. It's one that I've been throwing for a few years, and I've thrown it religiously and have caught a ton of fish on. Tim and I both have just slayed with this thing. What I like about the axe blade is it's a larger profile with a larger willow leaf, which is such a good shad imitator. It's so good. It gives me that larger profile, it gives a completely different vibration, and it works really well in open water situations. I believe its drawing power is much larger than some of the others. And then because it has that secondary hook, it's got a little hook there on the blade itself, my hook up to land ratio is excellent with this bait. Definitely one of my favorites. And there are a handful that we really like for one reason or another. And down in the video description, I'll link you all of them, the gear that we use, color recommendations, all that stuff to make it easy for you. So I won't jump into all these, but just 2 more immediate standouts. And then I'll show you the actual retrieves, because that's what you want to see, is how to fish this bait. But 2 more. This is a Blade Runner. You know the spoons that we like so much, the Dust spoons, that's a Blade Runner. Same guy makes this. It's a line through. How genius. If you're worried about hook up to land ratio, you put the line through and then you tie a treble hook on. So when you hook the fish, this entire thing slides up the line and you're left fighting the bass with just a bare treble hook in their mouth, and you don't have to worry about that swing weight. It slides up the line out of the way. Your hookup to land ratio goes way, way up with that one. And then last is this little guy right here. And again, I'll link him down in the video description, but that little guy, whoop, micro hooks, fairly lightweight compared to the others. I mean, let me grab one of these. Look at the hook size difference, even from a Daracoup, and the Daracoup is a tiny bait. See how small those little hooks are? This is a spinning rod bait, or a very, very light bait caster, but it catches them. I've had some dynamite success on this little guy. Honestly, I was shocked the first time I threw it. When I bought him, I didn't know how slowly that bait sunk. It was lighter weight than I expected, and it wasn't the bait I thought it was, and I thought I was going to be disappointed. Before I could even react, I was catching fish on it. So it found a place in my arsenal. Ultra light line, when the fish are really finessey and don't want to bite, I send that one down there and just creep it, and they come out and get it. These others, you can cover a ton of water, you can fish it with different retrieves, maximize your time, and they will stick fish. When do you throw them? Anytime the bass are targeting bait fish. That's when the time is that you want to throw these things. So if they're on active bait balls, you want to find those bait balls and throw it. Like here, I've got birds working the shoreline. There's obviously bait here. It's a prime place for throwing that tailspin. If there's busting fish, you can fish it down below them and catch those giant bass that don't want to come up and be part of the mix. Those more lethargic, heavier fish, the ones you're ultimately after, the tailspin will get down below busting fish and get them really well. A lot like an underspin will. It's just a little bit different look, a little more finessey. You can throw it on lighter line, and it lasts farther into the season. It will get bit in colder water than most of the other baits. As the bass head into that winter transition, they start bunching up on that deeper cover. It will work there too. You just fish it slower and more methodically. So that's enough of that. Let's jump up and I'll show you all these different retrieves and how we really fish these baits. There are essentially 4 retrieves that I will do with the tail spinner. The first is a simple chuck and wind, typically with a lighter weight tail spin, but if you're fishing deep water, you can use a heavier one to get down and hold bottom. But it is literally a cast it out, let it sink to your desired depth, and then just start a medium retrieve. You'll feel that blade kicking. The thing with a tail spin is they pulse a lot. There's a ton of vibration coming out of that blade, so you'll be well aware that it is kicking, and you just want to slow roll. That's it. Those fish will come up and just devour that thing. That basic retrieve is really simple. The second one is to sort of hop it along. Just sort of pump it through the water column. So I'll let it drop, start my retrieve, and just kind of pull it and reel up the slack. Pull it, reel up the slack. Now, right now I'm using a 1/2 ounce Daracoup, so I could do this in 5 or 6 feet of water, no problem, without hitting bottom. I could fish right above the bottom. If I wanted to let it hit bottom and fish it more like a lipless or a blade bait where you're bottom fishing, I could do that as well. If I jumped up to a 3/4 or a 1 ounce or one of the larger blades, or excuse me, the larger tail spinners, then I could do it down on the bottom in 20 or 30 or 40 feet of water. The thing with that blade is you can adapt it to do so many different things. Let's go to a heavier one. So this is the 1 ounce axe blade. Larger blade. It's going to pull back a little bit harder. We're in deep water here. I'm going to throw this out. We're in about 20, 25 feet of water. So I'm letting this bait go all the way to the bottom. And again, I could just slow roll. Just crawl that thing just off the bottom, and those fish will just come over and hit it. Think of it as a very finesse version of a spinnerbait. Very slow, creeping along. That's why it works so well as the water is cooling down as we head into winter, because these fish aren't having to run really fast or really far to chase it. This method, where I'm just sort of swimming it along, is one of my favorite ways as a 1-2 punch with a spinnerbait, or I'm sorry, spinnerbait, with a spoon. When I'm spooning, vertical spooning, and I lose my bait fish, I can't find them, all of a sudden they're out from under the boat. Taking this guy and throwing it out there and fan casting is one of my best ways to relocate that school of bait fish and relocate the bass, because I can make huge long casts with it. With a 3/4 or a 1 ounce, you can cast it a mile. It gets down really quickly. It's sinking right now in what, 23 feet of water. I'm already on bottom. And then I start that retrieve up again. So I'm covering a ton of water. I'm extremely efficient with this method, but the actual presentation is quite slow. Now, the third method here, the third way that I like to use this bait, is an on the bottom method. So what I'll do is I let it settle, and I'm going to reel it up a couple of cranks. This works best with the heavier versions of the baits, a 3/4 ounce or heavier, because if you go lighter than that, they don't fall fast enough. You end up covering too much distance. So what I'll do is I'm on the bottom, I'm tight. I'm gonna give it like 2 or 3 handle turns, and then I just hold. And that's it. And there's bottom. Couple handle turns, and I hold. What this is doing is the blade is shooting up off the bottom, right? It's swimming up, and then it starts to pendulum back towards the boat. So it shoots up when I reel it, and that blade is kicking back there behind the tail spinner. But as soon as I stop, it kind of breaks over and it starts a nosedive. But because it's on a tight line, it doesn't just drop back to bottom like a rock. It swings, it pendulums back to bottom. And these baits are so good at swimming while they pendulum. So it looks as good on its way down with that blade turning as it does on the way up. Again, another deadly, deadly way to fish this bait. I'll do one more of those. I'll do it up in a little bit shallow water, about 15 foot up here. And here I'm fishing down slope. Out here I'm just on a flat. It's just bare bottom. So every time I pick it up, it only has to drop as far as I lifted it. On a slope, it's falling down the slope. It's falling away. So it's harder for it to get back to bottom. So here I won't do as many handle turns. Let me get my slack out. I'll do maybe 1 or 2. And then let it fall. Back on bottom. Back on bottom. Back on bottom. This is keeping it close to the fish. So again, a ton of movement. I'm covering water, but I'm getting a directional change. I can draw a reaction strike, and I'm extremely efficient with my time on the water. All of these methods work very, very well this time of year. Last but not least, what kind of equipment should you use to throw this style of bait? Well, that is a little bit of a complicated answer because they are heavy baits, 1/2 ounce to 1 ounce, but they have a single, sometimes a second hook, but a lot of them don't have that second hook. So a single or double small treble hook, a very small hook for the weight of the bait. What that means to the angler is that without proper equipment, a lot of those fish are going to jump and come off. It could have a horrible hookup to land ratio if you're not careful. So what am I using? Well, this is my jerkbait rod. This is an X-Pride 610 medium. An amazing jerkbait rod. It crosses over as a fantastic rod for throwing that tail spinner. This is one of my crankbait rods. It's actually my lipless rod. That rod, again, designed to be super soft, super limber for treble hooks. I typically throw it with an LV 500, which is almost a 3/4 ounce bait with 2 treble hooks anyway. Virtually the same thing. So the difference is here, any rod that will work with treble hooks is going to work with these, but you want to adapt it. You want that rod to be soft. So this rod is softer than this one. So this one, the one that's extra soft, I'm not afraid to run braid on. Braid to a little bit of mono leader. I can feel that bait so well on that braid. It's incredible. It's like I'm down there. And when I get those fish and I hit them, that rod will load up so deep that that's where I'm getting the stretch and the give that's going to keep those fish pinned and keep them from bending out that hook. My jerkbait rod is a little bit stouter rod, but again can work great for this technique. But I go to straight fluorocarbon. That fluorocarbon is going to give it that little bit of extra stretch and give that I need to make up for that slightly stiffer rod overall. So I'm adapting my method with both to make 2 very different rods work extremely well for this technique. You don't need a dedicated rod for throwing a tail spinner, but what you do need is a really soft, really limber rod, a crankbait rod or a jerkbait rod, and then really adapt to soften it up. This is 12-pound fluoro. This is 20-pound braid to 12-pound mono, but I'm getting the same result out of both. And guys, the tail spin is an amazing way to catch these fish in the fall. It's an amazing way to catch them in winter. Once it gets truly frozen, I mean, when it's cold out here, the blade bait will take over and do better than the tail spin. But up until then, when they're still around bait fish, when they're still ambushing, that tail spin is a fish catching machine. You guys should be throwing it. I hope this video helps you. If it did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon.